Amid coronavirus outbreak, U.S. Navy challenges China in the South China Sea with largest operation. In challenging China's claims in the South China Sea, the U.S. Navy is getting more assertive. The U.S. Navy conducted more freedom of navigation operations in 2020 than in any year since the U.S. began more aggressively challenging China's claims in the South China Sea in 2015. The Navy conducted 7 FONOPs in the South China Sea last year, according to records provided by U.S. Pacific Fleet. The FONOPs are designed to challenge China's claim to maritime rights and dominion over several island chains in the region, which have put the U.S. and its allies at loggerheads with China. Patrols by U.S. warships come within 12 miles of features claimed by China, including features that the Asian nation has converted into military installations. The patrols are meant to signal that the U.S. considers the claims excessive. China views the patrols as irritating and unlawful intrusions into its waters. So far the FONOPs have not caused China to back down on its claims. The Obama administration authorized 2 FONOPs in 2015 and 3 in 2016. The program has escalated under the Trump administration, with the Navy conducting 6 in 2017 and 5 in 2018. However, during Trump's first 2 years in office, Navy transits of the Taiwan Strait dropped precipitously from 12 in 2016 to 5 in 2017, then just 3 in 2018. The Taiwan Strait transits picked up again in 2019, with 9 transits conducted through the year. In a statement, Pacific Fleet spokesperson Lieutenant J.G. Rachel McMahon said the Navy was committed to continuing to demonstrate its willingness to challenge excessive claims. U.S. forces routinely conduct freedom of navigation assertions throughout the world, McMahon said in a statement. All of our operations are designed to be conducted in accordance with international law and demonstrate that the United States will fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows, regardless of the location of excessive maritime claims and regardless of current events. The Navy conducted its first FONOP of 2020 on January 25, sending the littoral combat ship Montgomery past Chinese claims in the Spratly Islands. During that operation, China sent 2 fighter bombers scrambling overhead to intimidate the Montgomery, according to the country's state media. The U.S. Navy frames these FONOPs as challenging excessive claims by all powers in the region, and the January 25 patrol was officially aimed at China, Taiwan and Vietnam. Specifically, the Navy challenged the notion that innocent passage through claimed territorial waters requires previous notification. But China has been by far the most aggressive in its claims, going so far as to build island fortifications armed with anti-ship and anti-air missiles, according to the Pentagon's 2019 report on China. The U.S. military views that as a creeping violation of freedom of navigation, which some warn China might ultimately use to try to gain unfair advantages in global commerce. The uptick in FONOPs, tensions over protests in Hong Kong and Taiwan's ability to self-rule, and increasing clashes between China and Vietnam in recent months have combined to create increasing unease in the region, said Jichun Zhu, a professor of political science and international relations at Bucknell University. In the South China Sea, both the U.S. and China have beefed up their presence, he said. U.S.-China military ties have worsened as a result of Trump's signing of the Hong Kong Acts and Beijing's retaliation. Clashes between China and Vietnam seem growing, with Vietnam complaining about China's repeated intrusions into what Hanoi calls its exclusive economic zone. U.S. President Donald Trump in November signed a law supporting anti-government protests in Hong Kong. In the Taiwan Strait, tensions have grown, Zhu added. With Tsai Ing-wen's re-election, Beijing may feel reunification is more distant and something has to be done to arrest Taiwan's further drifting away. So the overall situation has deteriorated. Since 2017, the U.S. Navy has performed freedom of navigation operations (FONOPs) in the South China Sea routinely, on a basis of about every 2 months. In response to each operation, the People's Liberation Army Navy Plan customarily dispatches air and surface units to carry out verification and identification, and to warn the U.S. warships to steer away. Though now routine, these exercises continue to spark fierce debate in the academic circles and media of both countries. Chinese observers repeat official diplomatic statements, deny the legality of the operations, and overwhelmingly denounce the U.S. actions, while seldom giving voice to feasible ways of resolving the dispute. The U.S. FONOP program in the South China Sea has turned into a political battlefield with a legal facade between the two nations. It is not realistic for China to ask the United States to abandon its FONOPs, and it is just as unrealistic for the United States to ask China to simply drop its excessive maritime claims. The three policy options offered to China in this analysis, grounded in a realist perspective, could help define a path for escaping the deadlock. Thus far, U.S. FONOPs in the South China Sea have always occurred at times and locations decided unilaterally, giving Washington the upper hand over Beijing. By sticking to its routine, the United States asserts its right to free navigation in the South China Sea in direct opposition to the law of the People's Republic of China on the territorial sea and the contiguous zone and the declaration of the Government of the People's Republic of China on the baselines of the territorial sea, and in so doing undermines the authority of the Chinese government on its maritime rights of the South China Sea. By maintaining this course of action over time, the United States shapes international custom and consensus, strengthening international recognition of its freedom of navigation concept, which differs from that of China in regard to sovereignty, jurisdiction and historical rights. Every time the United States engages in a FONOP, the Chinese side waits to react. Each U.S. FONOP is usually followed by representations and protests lodged repeatedly by Chinese spokespersons in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of National Defense, and the Southern Theater, reiterating China's policy of taking necessary measures to defend national sovereignty and security. However, these statements do nothing to stop the next FONOP. The Chinese side also sends warships and military aircraft, with a stated goal of verifying and warning off the U.S. warships. But according to reports from media aboard the U.S. ships, the Chinese warships and military aircraft only follow the U.S. ships and monitor them from a safe distance, calling from time to time via radio to warn them off to no effect. China has largely stuck to this course of action for more than 3 years, and such a response has failed entirely at stopping U.S. FONOPs. It stands to reason that if China continues this style of response, further FONOPs will continue to undermine China's national credibility. On September 30, 2018, the USS Decatur was forced to change course during a FONOP near Nanchuan Reefs, Gavin Reefs, when the planned destroyer Lanzhou tried to intercept the U.S. destroyer. This is probably the only actual interception made by China's Navy on a FONOP since 2015. However, neither of the subsequent statements by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Ministry of National Defense said anything about the interception attempt or the forced course correction, giving up the opportunity to publicize what could be called a successful eviction. The low profile adopted by Beijing may be a clue that top Chinese officials did not approve the action, or that they are worried about its negative impact. In a Chinese military command system that emphasizes highly centralized and unified leadership, it is hard to imagine seeing another such interception by sea-air operating forces, if that was indeed the situation. Based on the current U.S. military presence in the Asia-Pacific region, the United States is unlikely to make concessions to Chinese military pressure. As far as FONOPs go, the United States has always pursued an unforgiving policy backed by military strength, and has never been intimidated by an adversary into halting FONOPs. In the 1980s, during the Cold War, even though the Soviet Navy dominated in some areas, the U.S. Navy insisted on carrying out FONOPs in the Soviet Union's territorial seas. Despite intentionally colliding with U.S. ships exercising innocent passage in the Black Sea in February 1988, the Soviet Union ultimately yielded to the U.S. position that innocent passage does not require approval from the coastal state. Considering the relative strength of Chinese and U.S. forces today, it is hard to believe that a tough response from China would be any more effective in forcing the United States to stop FONOPs. The global and long-standing practice of FONOPs by the United States over the past 3 decades also makes it less likely to be deterred from operations in the South China Sea. Since 1991, the United States has challenged the excessive maritime claims of nearly 60 countries around the world, and convinced at least 9 countries and areas to revise domestic legislation on innocent passage, including the Soviet Union, Bulgaria, Vietnam, Latvia, Sweden, Denmark, Indonesia, Finland, and Chinese Taiwan. Moreover, though the two countries have agreed on avoiding incidents and conflict in the air and at sea, this does not mean that the two nuclear powers are not prepared for small-scale conflicts. If China takes tough measures to intercept or collide with U.S. warships, the United States is less likely to suffer in potential air and sea small-scale conflicts because of its military superiority in the region. Even in a tie scenario, the heightened tensions in the South China Sea would create opportunities for the United States and its allies to reinforce their presence in the region. As a result, China would lose relative strength in the security order of the South China Sea.